want to welcome to Hopeful Tribe, Darlynn, Lockett, LCSW. I'm just so excited that you could come and talk with us about burnout today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I have a lot to say about burnout.
Do you really? Have you experienced burnout before?
Time and time again.
I'm laughing because I know we were almost coworkers,
Yes,
Darlynn
we
and I.
technically were.
Well, for one day, I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
coming into a place when she was leaving.
And I remember, Sue, you'd ask me right as I was on my way out, what do you wish you knew now that you didn't know when you were hired? And I went, do you really want to know? Do you want to know the truth? Crisis work, the good old days.
Yeah, yeah. Do you miss it? Do you miss it, darling?
I was just talking about this the other day. I have a special place in my heart for that type of work, for severe mental illness, for psychotic disorders. It's so funny because I could never work with children. I learned that very early on. I was like, kids, not my population, not my specialty.
Ah,
Got into working in crisis units. It's like working with children, but it's so different and I loved it. I loved it. And I got fluent in speaking psychosis, which is even better. When no one makes sense and you're like, I get exactly what you're saying.
mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, at times I really do miss it, but the vicarious trauma that comes with that, at that time in my life, I had a lot of my own trauma I was not willing to address. And so I was getting re-traumatized and unaware of it. Talking about burnout, I was a bit dissociated from my body, my emotions, had no idea because I thought this is normal. I can put everything in a box and go home and go back to work the next day and everything's fine. But it wasn't until I left that job I realized, okay, that was my past trauma with a layer of work trauma causing me to be a shell of a human.
Mm, 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 mm. Well, what inspired you to become a social worker in the first place?
That's a long journey. So, graduated high school. Knew I was going to college. It was kind of pushed in my family. Education's really highly valued. So it wasn't an option. I was going to college. Started pre-med, thought, oh, I'll be a doctor, right?
Oh,
Everyone
wow.
wants to be a doctor. Took chemistry, could not for the life of me pass the class.
Mm,
Took 3 semesters of it, barely passed with the skin of my teeth. I think I got like a C minus. It was not, I just couldn't retain that type of,
mm,
yeah. So was failing chemistry, getting really bad grades in school. I thought, man, I have to change my major. I got to do something. Talked to an advisor. They talked about psychology. I went, ooh, that sounds really interesting. Studied psychology, fell in love with it. Um, in my psychology career, I also was introduced to social work through kind of like elective courses, and I fell in love with social work. And so, kind of rewinding back, my grandmother had started up a Salvation Army nonprofit in the small town I worked in East San Diego. So really southeast San Diego where it snows, there's mountains. A lot of people go, what, it snows in San Diego? Yeah, where I grew up way out in the boonies. Um, there was a lot of poverty there. There was a lot of, trailer parks, a lot of low
mm,
income. So my grandmother started a not-for-profit with the Salvation Army, which had like a food pantry, clothes, donations. She would collect, and then the community would be able to come and get free items. So growing up, I had always been around public service. And then my own mother kind of took on my grandmother's mission after she
mm,
passed on, and my mother rented out, a big space, a big home with all these rooms. I remember kind of having piles and piles of free stuff, and as a kid, you're running through it, and you're like, "Oh, I found this new purse, and I got this new shirt." But we would always invite the community, and my father's a recovering addict, and so at the time he was in recovery, a lot of people in recovery who were also homeless or low income would come. So I had always been kind of in that realm for my whole life, and I'd seen what public service is and can do. And so was it a calling? Did it call me? Or was I, kind of born into it and thought, I want to keep this legend? I don't really know. But I took social work and I went, yeah, this is what I want to do. I liked psychology, but it was very personal. It was that, it's about the person. And I liked that social work was kind of a blend of the person and the systems around them. So I studied social work and fell in love with it. I am a social worker at heart. I can have all these titles. I can say I'm a licensed therapist, I'm a yoga instructor, I'm a holistic healer, but in me, I'm a social worker. I'm an advocate. I want human rights and justice. That's who I am.
Yeah. I was really attracted to a specific graduate program, but really, I'm more of a social worker at heart. I'm always thinking about the systems and how that created the problems people are encountering. That's just really more how I think. So,
yeah, there's nothing wrong with people inherently. It's the
right.
systems around them. It could be the family system, socioeconomic system, racist systems, you name it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, it took me, until I was way older than you, Darlynn, to figure out that there was really nothing wrong with the people. It was just really messed up systems. And I hope that eventually, all the humans will get that,
And we can make system change instead of
create.
putting it on the individual to make all the change. Because
Yes.
how are people going to be able to thrive with what's outside of them or not outside of them?
Oh, this is a good segue into the next question. The next question is, how do you think you burnt out? But I want you to really include in your answer how the systems contributed to your burnout.
I think I'm going to focus on the crisis work since we had kind of already touched on that.
Yeah.
Not to throw Amber House under the bus, but it was a toxic relationship that I'm glad I left. So it was a new program, right? It was exciting. We got to build it from the bottom up. But because it was a new program, there was a lot of policies that weren't in place. There wasn't a lot of safety that was being taken serious. And so, me as someone who gives 110%, I don't just give 100, I go in 110. I have boundary issues. That's my own kind of trauma response. I'm a yes girl. I'm like, yes, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? So I went in with this kind of fix it attitude, right? We're going to build this program up from the bottom. But I wasn't in management, right? And management was still learning. And now that I'm out of this toxic relationship that was Amber House, I'm able to kind of reflect back and go, okay, everybody was learning together. But when you're in that kind of work, it's so hard to see that, because day in and day out, you're dealing with things like homicide, people who are homicidal, people who are suicidal, people who are in severe anxiety episodes, people who are in severe psychotic breaks, right? And so for me, like I had mentioned previously, I had my own trauma I was stuffing and not willing to address. I had lost kind of my sense of self to give to others, but I was kind of like an emotional punching bag, and I wasn't taking good care of myself because I was working like 60 hours a week. I would go home and I would still have to be on my computer doing my notes. And then by the time I get done, right, that 3-day assessment window when you have 14 people to take care of, and then you have to find everyone housing, and you have an 8-hour shift, and not only on top of that, people are fighting, and you have to crisis manage, a physical fight, and then that's 2 hours of your day that you're sitting just talking with one person, then there's all these other people, and then you have to cook a meal for them.
And don't forget, you also had to figure out where they were going to go after they got discharged.
So we carried the weight of their housing, yes, exactly. So I was stuffing my own self. I was stuffing my own needs for the selflessness of others, which is what you do in that kind of work. But I was unaware of the long-term consequence of that. So from a systems perspective, management was learning, but management was not, I did not feel supported at that time. I felt like a lot of staff were very vocal about their needs, like safety first and foremost, and it wasn't, taken as serious as it should have been. Um, a lot of policies weren't in writing to keep staff safe, which I think is really important as a social worker now, kind of taking a step back. The macro safety of an organization needs to be put in writing what to do so everyone knows standards. Okay, when this happens, this is what we do. That wasn't at Amber House. Yeah, it was just a really tough time. Kind of reflecting back on it, I'm just kind of like having this reaction like, "Whew, I'm glad I survived it." Right now,
Mhm.
that's what like my is.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and how do you feel like the lack of institutional support for the staff affected the quality of care?
So we know trickle down economics doesn't work, but trickle down care in an organization sure as hell can.
Mm.
So starting at the top, if upper management, starting with executive management, can support who's under them, the hierarchy can continue to trickle down that culture of an organization. But I think it does have to start at the top,
Yes.
because of power dynamic, right? Like it exists. We can't ignore it. And this type of so with this type of organization in particular, I think that the culture was there overall, but there was a lot of like fragmentation between upper management and the clinicians, because the clinicians are the ones on the front lines. We are working with the patients, the clients that come in. We are doing the hard work. Upper management's job is to then support the clinicians, so the clinicians can support the people coming in for services. And then it just works its way up. And then clinician, the manager of them, they have a manager who supports them. So in theory, I think that support is really important. And I think there was efforts to make that happen. But to me, I'm a person who receives support by action, not just
Mm.
words. And I think for the longest time, my experience in this organization was a lot of talk.
Mm.
In my personal life, I also hold this value. I'm a person that says, if you're going to say something, I want to see the action behind it. Under promise, over execute. And there was a lot of over promising, under executing. And so in a perfect world, I think there was well intentions. There was well intentions. There was a lot of talk about what can change and would change, but there was no follow up. There was no action piece. And that action piece is the most important thing, because we need to feel supported as clinicians to be able to do that kind of work. That wasn't happening.
Hmm. Yeah. How do you feel like that affected your personal life while you were in that job and feeling burnt out and unsupported?
I had a lot of anger.
Mm.
I had a lot of anger because I was stuffing. Um, I was stuffing my own emotions to be able to show up at work. In crisis work, you cannot let your own emotions bleed through, because you have to be completely present with that other person to help them self-regulate. And every interaction is a crisis. It's a crisis unit. It's a residential treatment for people in a crisis. So in a crisis situation, that person needs you to be completely mute and neutral and regulated so they can then regulate themselves. A lot of the time, I was not regulated, but not aware of it.
Mm.
So my number one response when I would get home was anger. Sometimes I would have anxiety to the point where I would like shake
Mm.
and be so upset and not know why, and go, but I had a good day at work. I don't know. I got this person housing. I had all these successes. I don't know why I feel this way. I have a great marriage. I have a home. I have this amazing meal I just made myself. Why the hell do I feel this way? I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware of the long-term impact of what shoving down my emotions and ignoring them would have on me. So the number one thing I realized is that anger bled over into the real world. I had a hard time kind of turning off those negative emotions and being kind of present.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it was really tough.
Yeah. Um, were you able to find some support outside of the workplace?
At that time, no, because most of my friends were in it. Because
Mm,
when you work in a crisis unit, you go, my God, this is a bubble. We're seeing some things that majority of people go their entire life without seeing. It can be really isolating. So I found myself really kind of relying on the people I worked with to be able to talk and create friendships with. It's almost like trauma bonding in a way.
mm-hmm.
So outside of work, I would say support was really limited, but inside that traumatizing system, it was almost really cathartic and healing to be able to create relationship and friendship with people who get it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but outside of work, thinking back to that time, I really did try my best to have like a work life separation. I found that to be really helpful, even though it's really tough working with the unhoused community and then not having a car. I would walk myself to and from work. I'd be walking home from
Oh,
work and I'd,
that's
walk right
right.
by a community of people that are unhoused. And I hear my name and I'm going, oh, hi, head down. I'd wear my hat, and it was tough, but I would really try to set that boundary. Kind of when I got home, I didn't turn my phone on. I would keep my cell phone turned off, my work phone. I would keep my computer turned off after I finished my notes. That had to be done in very particular time. Um, Boundaries are something I'm still working on.
Right? Well, I feel like it's a lifetime journey.
Exactly, exactly.
One of the things I did to help myself this year is I made a promise to myself that I was only going to do what I wanted to do.
Mm.
It's pretty awesome. You should try it sometime. um, what are you doing now?
Part of Hopeful Tribe.
Awesome.
Turning my life around. So what am I doing now? I am first and foremost staying sober.
Mm.
Self-medication, talking about burnout, was huge. How did I cope? I'd go out to the bars, I'd go dancing, I'd go get wasted, right? I couldn't I wasn't feeling already, but then these distressing emotions were coming up. So what I do, I'd go and medicate them away. And then guess what? They come back. So nowadays I'm staying sober.
That's amazing.
Inspired by you though.
Aw. I was lucky because I actually started work in this field after I got sober. So
Ah.
I I didn't end up using that as a coping skill because it was already out of the question.
Yeah, I had this weird association that drinking or partying was my self-care.
Mm, I think a lot of Americans feel that way.
Yeah. But guess what? It does not help. It did not help me feel better. I can't speak for everybody, but it did not help me feel better. If anything, it made me way more unhealthy mentally and physically than yeah.
It's not a great long-term self-care strategy.
It's a good
I think it
band-aid.
only helps for moments.
Yeah.
Um, because at the end of the day, when you wake up the next morning, your problems are still there.
And then you feel hungover and you're like, God, why did I drink that much the other night? I do not miss that.
um, if you were to give a talk to social work students about burnout, what would you tell them?
listen to yourself, listen to your body, take care of your body, but actually take care of it. So good sleep, stay hydrated, make sure you're eating. There would be times where I would do a full shift at Amber House, 8 hours, and I would go, oh my gosh, I didn't eat all day. I didn't take one break. Rest, take breaks. I mean, just kind of the basic, back to the hierarchy of needs, just the basics. Eat, sleep, stay hydrated, take your breaks.
Yeah, isn't that something? How the structures we have set up, most of them that are supposed to be helping people, really don't make it easy for people to have those basic needs met.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
And we're working with people who we're trying to teach to take care of themselves. That's also the interesting phenomenon. We're trying to teach others when we're not practicing what we preach.
Right? Just do as I say, not as I do.
Oh, yeah, I heard that growing up. Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. So let's say you were to go back to that place and you were to say, I think there's some changes that you should make to the system here to make it more sustainable for the staff and make it possible for them to even provide better care for the clients. What would you offer?
Oof. Would this be me stepping into that role of being able to offer it, or just kind of like system
Yeah, just
changes?
like they're just asking for a consult. You don't have to stay there and do it. Just, Darlynn, what would you do differently so that fewer people will burn out?
I would say receive regular feedback from staff and actually try to implement their feedback, because
Mm,
people need different things. And
yes.
so, I might say, I really need help keeping myself accountable to take my break, manager. Can you please make sure every, couple of hours I'm taking a break, I'm going outside, I'm getting a breath of fresh air. Whereas you might say, no, I like to just power through my day. I might need more support with like a weekly emotional debrief, right? Or whatever it might be. So I think that would be really important for there to be a place for staff to feel heard, but the action piece actually being taken care of
Mm,
with whatever, people need. Probably more morale building too.
mm,
More self-care morale building. Taking your staff out of work, taking them out to dinner, maybe dishing out a little bit of funds. I mean, I know it's a not-for-profit, but they make a pretty good amount of money. They pay their clinicians quite well. Send them to a weekend retreat. I don't know, alternate who can go and do what. Give a monthly wellness stipend where you encourage them to go out and get holistic health care, something to get them out and
yeah.
let them be able to focus on themselves, but encouraging that too. I think when I was there wasn't an encouragement to take care of oneself. It was more an encouragement to do more for the program.
Mm-hmm.
You need to do more notes on time. You need to, keep our beds full. It was about productivity, output, but there wasn't an emphasis on people taking care of themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
think that would need to change. And
Mm,
the manager would probably have to step in if that were if that were to happen. Because if your staff is out taking care of themselves, who's going to be there doing the work? Maybe the manager should step in to help out their team, working alongside, not just above.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, those are good things. I really especially appreciate the part about um, offering things that will encourage self-care, like the wellness bonus money or um, weekly emotional support groups or things like that, you know?
Or hey, a dinner at someone's house, you know, no alcohol. Come on over, let's have tea and cupcakes or cookies. I mean, you got to have dessert, but you know, it's just something to get people together and help build community, and also let your staff vent.
Mm,
That's a big thing. Let your staff show up in a space with people who get it and say, "Guess what, guys? This job really fucking sucks and is really hard. I'm drained. I'm burned out. I don't know what to do." Because a person being able to speak that and talk about it is healing sometimes in itself. Just having people who can validate their feelings,
hmm
maybe sit in the misery with them a little bit. Crisis work is really hard. I think that is also something that is needed. A lot of people don't want to complain, right? We don't want to put our job on the line, but sometimes we have to. We have
hmm
a lot of stuff we're taking in. It's good to get it out. Sometimes we're fed up. We're human.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I've been out here on these streets for a long time. And so one of the things I've noticed about a lot of community mental health agencies is that they give a lot of lip service to self care, but the only people who get promoted are people who don't take care of themselves.
Mhm.
So it's very clearly communicated, you know.
And
Um,
then what standard does that set? When you're looking at the top and you're going, oh, if I want to be up there or if I want to
Mhm.
work here, I got to be like that. That's setting the culture.
Right. And then I mean, I really don't even blame them because the dominant culture that all these, you know, community mental health agencies are living within says, you know, you need to be more productive. You need to make more money. You need to bill more. You need to um, have better outcomes. You have to, you know,
Mhm.
all these darn metrics. It seems like every year there's some new metric that the nonprofits are driving towards, you know.
Yeah. And then the window of when you can get your work in gets smaller and smaller.
Yes. Remember, so when you were there before I started, you had a 3 day paperwork deadline and you were having to work 60 hours, right? I had
Something
a
like that.
1 day. After about a month, they changed it to a 24-hour deadline.
Which is
It's
impossible.
insane.
Because on top
Insane.
of that, you have all these other notes from people you're seeing. You're constantly observing and you're documenting as to how people are behaving. So you're always, it was a lot. It was too much. It's not humanly possible. 3 days
Well,
was not possible.
yeah, I think I'm a little bit alien or something, but I managed to get it done. But I was the only clinician there that could. And we were actually threatened when they changed the deadline to be fired if we didn't. And so, you know, I just did my best.
That was another, I think maybe that's a systems issue too. We'll call it that, where it was very it was very threatening and punitive rather than supporting. So like you're
Yes.
mentioning, they had, you know, I think I had heard the same thing. You have to get your deadlines in or else your job's on the line versus, hey, how can, like as management, how can I support you to make sure you can get your paperwork in? There was
hmm
none of that. It was do it or else.
Yeah.
That will cause a person to burn out. That caused me to burn out, constantly stressed about my job being on the line if I didn't get this unrealistic expectation of paperwork in. When all I want to do is be with the people. That's where the real magic happens, is one on one,
hmm
not on the computer typing in your notes. I mean, I get why documentation is important. You have to bill it or it didn't happen, but
Yeah. Yeah. It's all just gotta change. That's all I got to say about it. You know,
mhm.
we need different systems that are going to be more healing for the people who do the work and the people who are receiving the care. You know, that's just
Imagine
all
a
there is.
world where we did not have to document. We could just show up and do the work.
Hmm. Well, I got that little fantasy for 5 years. For 5 years in my career, I got to work on this tiny little mobile mental health unit in San Francisco, and it was all privately funded. And I did take notes because I have a horrible memory, but I didn't have
Mhm.
to. Nobody ever checked them. Never. So it was pretty awesome for 5 years to just get to focus on people's needs and what was going to work the best for them. That was so cool.
That's the dream.
Yeah. 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 Well, I really thank you for your time and your gorgeous lipstick.
Thank you. Just for you.
We've never gotten made up for each other before. It's special.
That's right. Because I was so tired all the time when I was working, burnt out. I didn't have the energy. Oh, but that's another thing we could touch
Ah,
on real quick.
yeah.
Taking care of our physical self.
Mm-hmm.
That opposite action piece. When we don't feel good, we don't want to put on the nice clothes. We want to wear our comfy pants. We let our hygiene go. We think that makes us feel good to be comfortable, but then all of a sudden we realize we haven't showered in 7 days. I'm talking for myself. That happened when I was
Oh
doing crisis
man.
work. I thought, well, I'm going to go to work and, run around anyways. But what a difference it makes to get in the shower every day, to wash off the day after you get home, right? To
Mm-hmm.
do a little bit of your hair and makeup when I had hair.
Yeah. Mm. Oh, I gotta ask you one more question. Hold on. What gives you hope?
I think that for me, this sounds a bit cliche, but just having freedom emotionally, freedom physically. I know I had touched on, my own trauma stuff that I stuffed. Freedom from that, freedom from the chains of the past. Just thinking about having the capacity to make my own choices, right? And to help others learn that they can make their own choices too.
Mm,
I think freedom.
I'm right there with you. Oh my goodness, that was fun.